Hi Year 2, it's Miss White here. We're very excited to be sharing with you a new unit. We're going to be doing this over about 3 weeks, and it's going to be based on the story of Lost and Found. I'll just show you the cover here. So Lost and Found by Oliver Jeffers. You're going to be this week focusing on learning a lot about the book and looking at the language. So your first big write isn't going to come until the end of the second week, but I'm still going to show you what you're going to be building up to. So if you have a look at the grid, just to remind you, you're aiming to achieve everything in the green section. And as a bit of a challenge, you want to focus on the yellow. Now, a big thing with the story of Lost and Found that I'm going to read to you in a moment, it is a voyage and return story. So our character is going to go on a journey, return to the original setting at the end. So that's going to be the structure that you're going to be following in this unit. One of the main language features we're going to be looking at is the different use of verbs and the use of conjunctions. So looking at and, but, or using so, or, and some subordination. So that's where our simple, compound and complex sentences come in. As always, big focus on your use of full stops and capital letters as well. So I'm going to read you the story. Once there was a boy, and one day he found a penguin at his door. The boy didn't know where it had come from, but it began to follow him everywhere. The penguin looked sad, and the boy thought it must be lost. So the boy decided to help the penguin find its way home. He checked in the Lost and Found office, but no one was missing a penguin. He asked some birds if they knew where the penguin came from, but they ignored him. Some birds are like that. The boy asked his duck, but the duck floated away. He didn't know. That night, the boy couldn't sleep for disappointment. He wanted to help the penguin, but he didn't know how. The next morning, he discovered that penguins come from the South Pole. But how could he get there? He ran down to the harbour and asked a big ship to take them to the South Pole, but his voice was much too small to be heard over the ship's horn. So together, he and the penguin would row to the South Pole. The boy took his rowboat out of the cupboard and they tested it for size and strength. They packed everything they would need. And together they pushed the rowboat out to the sea. They rowed south for many days and nights, with the boy telling stories all the way. The penguin listened to everything that the boy said. They floated through good weather and bad, when the waves were as big as mountains, until they came to the South Pole. The boy was delighted, but the penguin said nothing. Suddenly it looked sad again as the boy helped it out of the boat. The boy said goodbye and floated away, but as he looked back, the penguin looked sadder than ever. It felt strange to be on his own, and the more he thought, the more he realised he was making a big mistake. The penguin wasn't lost, he was just lonely. Quickly he turned the boat around and headed back to the South Pole as fast as he could. At last he reached the pole again. But where was the penguin? The boy searched and searched, but he was nowhere to be found. Sadly, the boy set off for home. There was no point telling stories because there was no one to listen except the wind and the waves. But then the boy saw something in the water ahead of him. Closer and closer he got until he could see the penguin. And so the boy and his friend went home together, talking of wonderful things all the way. And that's the end of the story. So you can see there why it's called A Voyage and Return. Their voyage is to the South Pole, and the story ends with them returning home. And that's what you're going to be writing your own story on next week. This week, you're going to be doing some book talk. So we've got a book talk sheet for you to talk about what you liked about the story, what you noticed. I'm just going to show you that sheet now. So you're going to be doing a little bit about the characters. What we'd like you to do in this box is write about the characters, maybe some adjectives, descriptive words to describe them. When we talk about plot and places, the plot is what happened in the story. So you're going to summarise the main events. What did the characters do and learn? So a little bit more of a detailed summary. So thinking about how the boy's attitude towards the penguin changed at the end of the story. And finally, some likes and dislikes. It would be good if you could justify what you liked or disliked about the story, and you use my favourite word, because. On Friday this week, you're going to create your very own vocabulary tree. Now, we've just given you an example here to show you. It doesn't have to look exactly the same, but the idea is that all of the leaves on your tree are different words from the story, and your big focus is going to be on the verbs, the doing words, because you'll notice there's quite a nice range of verbs. We've got verbs like ran, there was discovered on the previous page. There's words like row, so you row the boat, tested, packed. And notice in particular when they're sailing as well. So they rowed south, floated as well. So having a look at those. Any other descriptive phrases or words that really grab your attention, add those to your tree as well, because you can save it and use it to help you with your own story. Now, if we go back to the marking grid, just have another look. So the main thing is, again, using the sections, the sequence of events. Now, when it says chronological order, it just means that the story follows the order, a good time order that it needs to be in. Handwriting, please keep using letter join and focus on your handwriting as well. And spelling as well, so you can use your phonics knowledge. Look at some of the phonics in the folder to help you with your spellings. You've got high frequency words in your homework diaries as well, that will help you. So I have had a go at writing my own version of Lost and Found. And this time my character is a girl, and instead of a penguin, she's going to find a tiger. So I've written here, once there was a girl and she found a tiger on her doorstep. The girl did not know where it had come from. It began to follow her everywhere. The tiger looked sad. The girl thought it was lost. Now you'll notice I used far too many simple sentences here. The girl did not know where it had come from. It began to follow her everywhere. The tiger looked sad. The girl thought it was lost. It's not as enjoyable to listen to. So back to the grid. We can use some conjunctions to vary our sentences. So I want to include some compound sentences. Now, throughout your writing, you can go back to the story, and you're more than welcome to magpie the sentence structures you read. So instead of saying the boy didn't know where it come from, full stop, it began to follow him, they've used but. So I'm going to do the same. So I can delete my capital letter because I don't need one instead of conjunction. The tiger looked sad. The girl thought it was lost. I'm going to make that a compound sentence as well. I'm just going to use and. The girl thought it was lost. But we could also, because I know some of us like to vary our conjunctions, you could include so there. It makes sense. The tiger looked sad, so the girl thought it was lost. Because what we know at the end of the story is the tiger is sad, but not because he's lost, but because he's lonely. It says here, the girl asked lots of people, but no one knew where the tiger was from. When she looked in her books, comma, she found out that tigers live in India. A couple of things about this sentence. I have used here what we would call a subordinating conjunction. I've used when, and I've had to put a comma here. Now, we did some of this in class with our complex sentences. This part of the sentence does not make sense on its own, so we call that a subordinate clause. So starting your sentences with words like when, if, although, that will make a complex sentence. Another thing that's important, I've used the capital letter for India because it is a name of a country. So my next sentence, now you can add a lot more detail. So there's a bit more build up in the original story of the boy asking more and more characters. So if I wanted to add more detail here, I could have the girl going and asking maybe her mummy if she knew where the tiger was from. She could also go to Lost and Found. I might even, when I edit this, which will be my next video in a couple of weeks, I could also add in things like her visiting a pet shop. I want to get started on the main important part of this story, and that is my voyage. So, getting to India, you won't sail there, you'll probably get an aeroplane. So I'm going to have the girl and the tiger going onto a little aeroplane. So I've said here, together the girl and the tiger jumped into an aeroplane. They flew for many days in good weather and bad. Now, if we're checking our full stops and capital letters here, I've actually got two sentences here. So I must read it through, listen for where I pause for a breath. I'm going to put my full stop here and my capital letter. So they flew for many days in good weather and bad, full stop. Now, just because it's not on the marking grid, one thing that we did in our last unit, we can think of better words, can't we, than good and bad. So we could say for many days in fantastic weather and terrible weather. Just makes it sound a bit more exciting. Now, I'm going to refer back to the story to see what happens next in Lost and Found so that I can get some ideas. So, once they're in their boat and they travel, I could add a bit, if I wanted to, about the girl telling the tiger stories. So I could add that in here. Every day, the girl told the tiger. Now, I can't use fantastic again. I don't want to keep repeating, so I'm going to use the word. It's a good synonym for interesting. Fascinating stories. And I can make a compound sentence here. And the tiger listened carefully. Something else I'm doing with my verbs here, you can add adverbs, again, just for that more detail. Now, I don't know why it's telling me to put a comma there. You do not need a comma there. So every day the girl told the tiger fascinating stories and the tiger listened carefully. In the story of Lost and Found, they get to the South Pole. And at this point, the boy's really happy because he thinks he's sent the penguin home, which is what the penguin wanted, but the penguin doesn't like it. So I'm going to I really like this sentence structure of suddenly. So I'm going to say here, I'm going to start with finally, comma, they arrived in the jungle in India. The girl was so excited, but the tiger did not make a sound. So I'm going to go back to that sentence I said I liked. So here it says, suddenly it looked sad again as the boy helped it out of the boat. So I can say here, suddenly it looked sad again as the girl helped it out of the plane. So there is absolutely nothing wrong, children, with magpieing from the sentences and changing them to suit your own story. What you want to do is make sure you think carefully about which characters and settings you want to include. Some ideas for next week will be things like, well, we've got a tiger in a jungle. You could have a monkey in the jungle or in a rainforest as well. You can have a camel in a desert. So there's lots of different choices. As I say, this bit of writing isn't going to be until next week. You've got book talk this week. You've got looking at all of the exciting language. And you're going to also be doing, just as a bit of a recap, a couple of days of just working through some different SPAG activities, spelling, punctuation and grammar activities, just to refresh your memory, ready for some more writing and also eventually ready for year 3 as well. Please, if you have any questions, message me or Mrs. Gallivan on Dojo, and we look forward to seeing all of your lovely learning for this unit. It's a really lovely book and we're very, very excited to be working through this with you.